So let me get this straight. You want to solve the homeless crisis with beauty products? Even through the crunching tech noises of a Zoom call gone bad, I could hear the confusion in the voice of my board of director. I can't exactly blame her. My idea sounded pretty ludicrous. You might be wondering how I even came up with such a silly solution to a centuries-old issue. But in order to understand my ideas and my initiatives, you need to know my beliefs and where I come from. I spent my childhood disintegrating upon beanbag chairs in the back of a dimly lit classroom reading stories. I guess you could call me a bit of an idealist, but this was my safe space. Even at that age, I understood that there was a whole wide world around me. I saw that somewhere in the world a polar bear was standing on a singular block of ice. Somewhere in the world guns were going off on innocent civilians. Somewhere families were being torn apart and disaster was striking. It was a really scary world, and it was definitely not one that I wanted to be a part of. So I learned to write from tea-stained pages of Nancy Drew and ancient editions of Time, scrawling my own words in sideway chalk until they were washed over by the rain. As I grew up, so did my literary repertoire. Before I knew it, I was wandering around Central Park with Holden Caulfield, rewriting history with Winston Smith, and filling my world up with fictional characters. I found myself trading in bedtimes for new stories, adopting a Fitzgerald-esque mentality towards each new novel I acquired. I like large parties, they're so intimate. So, amidst the ruckus of clamoring kids, the soft whistle of planes taking off overhead, and the white noise of a flickering light close to death, I would bury myself in thrifted books from my town's local library. Their covers were ripped, their pages stained with coffee, and they were filled with barely legible annotations and faded neon highlights. Yet they were clearly loved, and I liked knowing that the stories that I was coming to inhabit were stuff that had been shared with others before me. These books helped me understand. I learned to read between the lines. My favorite novels centered around barely coherent plot lines and unreliable narrators, where I learned to acknowledge shades of gray in literature and in life. Just like the books I read, life was messy. There was always two sides to every story. In my life growing up in a New Jersey suburb, I've had clean water and emotional support animals and classes to help me understand the world around me. As a high school senior, here is what I've learned. Democracy is dying. Polar bears are dying. The sea is rising. Fascism is rising. History has just begun, and today is just starting. It was tempting for me to retreat inside this literary ivory tower, burying myself under piles of literature to escape the less appealing world of the present. However, if there's anything that books have taught me, it was that I owed it to society to use the gifts that I had and the education that I've received for the better. When I was in 7th grade, I was the kid who walked around school with an assortment of political pins taped to my lapel and a sticker of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on my laptop. I didn't have extensive funding or a platform or even a college education or a high school education for that matter, like many of the leaders in my community. However, what I did have was a desire to follow in the leads of the courageous literary role models and use the gifts that I had to address the problems that I cared about. For example, when I noticed a lack of political representation from youth voices, I began writing for national newspapers and magazines, breaking down echo chambers and talking about the problems that I cared about, finding my own voice through journalism. When I began to notice gender discrimination in my school, I founded Girls Who STEAM, a 501c3 organization that over the past 4 years has offered accessible enrichment programs for underprivileged girls. That is, until this past summer when I visited a women's shelter and noticed the unsanitary conditions that women lived in there. After doing some research about the lack of dignity that exists within shelter systems, I set out on a project to distribute skincare products to local shelters. It was a small step, but it brings us closer to the combination lock of getting women off the streets and onwards towards addressing their dreams. When my board of directors made the assumption that I wanted to solve homelessness with beauty products, she was wrong. I can't solve all the mental health issues that exist within shelters by distributing skincare products, just like I can't solve gender discrimination through a nonprofit that I started, or I can't solve polarization by writing for a few newspapers. The reality is that all of the big, complicated issues in the world can't just be solved by one person. However, what I can do is launch social entrepreneurship initiatives that can help a few people, teach others about this issue, and at best, inspire the world to collectively act for social good. I'm done with just understanding. I'm done with just reading sad books, getting tested on historical genocides, and feeling helpless. I'm committed to using innovative leadership techniques to tackle important leadership challenges facing my community. While some might say that my initiatives are just a band-aid for a bullet wound, I am proud that I am setting the precedent for youth leadership, and I am inspiring others to get involved with issues and social entrepreneurship initiatives that can impact their community. It starts here, by investing in young people with big, bold ideas to make the world a better place. Thank you.